Welcome to Avoidant Decoded, where we uncover the hidden emotions, silent patterns, and psychology behind avoidant behavior. And today, we're exploring what really happens when you finally stop chasing an avoidant. The moment everything begins to change is often the moment you genuinely stop trying to make someone stay. Not because you're pretending to be distant, not because you're using silence as a tactic to get a reaction, but because something inside you has finally shifted. You reach a point where your emotional world no longer revolves around another person's attention, responses, or unpredictable behavior. And when you've been deeply involved with someone who has dismissive or fearful avoidant tendencies, that change can feel surprisingly powerful. You've probably experienced the exhausting pattern before. You reach out, and they pull back. You open your heart, and they become emotionally unavailable. You try harder to create closeness, yet somehow they seem to retreat even further. You continue giving your time, attention, patience, and emotional energy while they protect themselves behind distance, logic, silence, and an outward appearance of not caring. That pattern can repeat for months or even years until one day something inside you simply becomes tired of carrying it. Maybe you've finally accepted what the relationship is instead of constantly hoping it will become something different. Maybe you've realized that explaining yourself one more time won't change anything. Whatever the reason, your energy becomes different. You stop feeling responsible for fixing every problem. You stop defending the relationship whenever it becomes unstable. You stop waiting for the day they suddenly become emotionally open. Instead, you quietly release your grip. You detach, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And when an avoidant senses that your emotional attention is no longer centered around them, they may notice the difference much sooner than you expect. When they realize you aren't waiting for the next mixed signal, the next message, or the next moment of closeness, something within their familiar sense of security can begin to change. For someone who has always found emotional distance comforting, your emotional independence can feel unfamiliar. Avoidant people often use space as a way of protecting themselves from vulnerability. Keeping others at a certain distance can make intimacy feel more manageable. And when someone is constantly pursuing them, reassuring them, or trying to repair the connection, that pattern can quietly give them a sense of control. They know you're still there. They know you'll probably reach out again. They know that even if they withdraw, the emotional connection will continue because you're carrying most of the responsibility for keeping it alive. As long as you continue chasing, they rarely have to confront what they actually feel. But when you stop filling every empty space they create, the entire dynamic changes. The long messages disappear. The anxious reactions disappear. The constant explanations disappear. Instead of responding to every distance with more effort, you become calm. Instead of trying to pull them closer, you return your attention to your own life. And that difference can be impossible for them to ignore. Their first reaction may not be sadness. It may simply be confusion. They expected the same pattern to continue. They expected you to eventually reach out, ask what was wrong, reassure them, or try to repair the emotional distance. But now you're not doing any of those things. They may begin wondering why you're suddenly so quiet. Why aren't you upset? Why aren't you asking questions? Why don't you seem as emotionally affected as before? Why does it look like you're continuing with your life without needing their approval? Avoidant people often don't immediately sit down and consciously analyze these feelings. They may notice the change first and understand it later. Their curiosity can become the beginning of a new emotional process. They may test the connection in small ways. Perhaps they send a casual message, react to something you posted, send a joke, share a memory, say hello late at night, or suddenly check in without any obvious reason. Sometimes these actions are not necessarily a declaration that they want the relationship back. They may simply be trying to discover whether they still have the same place in your emotional world. Your silence doesn't necessarily tell them you're angry. What it communicates is something much more unsettling. You're no longer emotionally dependent on their behavior. For someone who became accustomed to your consistent attention while maintaining their own emotional walls, that realization can create uncertainty. They may begin wondering whether the person who was always available is finally becoming unavailable, not because you're playing a game, but because you've genuinely learned how to let go. And that is where emotions they previously avoided may begin coming to the surface. When they recognize that your care isn't being offered in the same way anymore, feelings such as loss, regret, uncertainty, and even fear can become harder to ignore. They may not know how to express those emotions directly, so instead of saying, "I miss you," they may become nostalgic. They might mention an old memory, compliment you unexpectedly, ask how you're doing, or find an excuse to start a conversation. They may ask questions that indirectly reveal they're wondering whether you've moved on. Sometimes irritation appears too, but the frustration may not truly be about you. It may come from the uncomfortable emotions they're experiencing inside themselves. The emotional distance that once felt protective can begin to feel strangely empty. Your absence makes them recognize how much your presence had quietly become part of their emotional routine. Even though they kept you at a distance, they may have depended on the stability of knowing you were there. Your consistency became familiar, your attention became reassuring, your presence became something they could count on without having to fully expose themselves emotionally. Once that disappears, the walls they built can begin to feel less like protection and more like isolation. The space that once gave them comfort may suddenly remind them of what they could lose, and seeing you move forward peacefully can make that realization even stronger. Avoidant people can be highly sensitive to changes in emotional dynamics. They may notice when you stop organizing your life around them. They may notice when you're no longer waiting for their decision. They may notice that you're investing your energy in your own happiness instead of watching for signs that they might finally choose closeness. And watching you become emotionally independent can communicate something that years of conversations couldn't. It shows them that you are capable of standing on your own. It shows them that your life doesn't stop when they pull away. It shows them that their distance no longer controls your emotional state. And once they realize that, they may have fewer external explanations for why the relationship failed. They can no longer simply say that you cared too much, asked for too much, or wanted too much closeness. Eventually, they may have to look inward and consider their own role in the pattern. Of course, not every avoidant person responds in the same way. One person may suddenly become more communicative and try to reconnect. Another may lower their defenses and make an awkward but genuine attempt to rebuild trust. Someone else may respond by becoming even more distant and pretending nothing has changed. They may continue their daily life as though your absence means nothing, but appearing unaffected doesn't necessarily tell you what is happening internally. They may still remember you. Certain conversations may replay in their mind. They may quietly wonder how you're doing. They may look at your social media from a distance, or become curious about whether someone else has entered your life. Some may even rush toward another relationship because staying busy feels easier than sitting alone with emotions they don't know how to process. That doesn't automatically mean they have moved on in a healthy way. Sometimes, distraction simply creates temporary relief from feelings that still need to be faced. And there is an important irony here. While you were constantly expressing your love, they may not have fully understood what your presence meant to them. But when you stop providing that emotional reassurance, their own feelings can become harder to escape. Your absence can reveal something that your constant presence never could. Still, there is an important distinction to remember. An avoidant returning does not always mean an avoidant has changed. Sometimes they come back because they miss the emotional security you provided. Sometimes they want to know whether they still matter to you. Sometimes they want reassurance that they haven't been replaced and that they can still affect your emotions. And sometimes their return is genuine. Losing your presence can force them to recognize patterns they've ignored for a long time. Without your constant reassurance, they may finally see how their own behavior contributed to the distance between you. They may become willing to approach intimacy differently. But by the time that happens, you may no longer be sitting around waiting for them to figure everything out. And that is where the real transformation occurs. Whether they return with sincere intentions, confusing signals, or never return at all, your stability no longer depends on their decision. Your self-worth is no longer connected to whether they choose you. You are no longer negotiating your emotional well-being with someone who repeatedly withdraws whenever closeness becomes uncomfortable. Instead, you're standing in a different place, a place of self-respect, awareness, emotional balance, and inner peace. Truly stopping the chase doesn't mean you have become heartless. It doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you've stopped abandoning yourself in order to keep another person close. You no longer pursue relationships that constantly leave you confused. You no longer beg for consistency from someone who isn't prepared to provide it. You stop using another person's emotional limitations as evidence against your own worth. You finally choose yourself without feeling guilty for doing so. And that is often the part an avoidant never expected. When you detach sincerely, you don't just leave the cycle, you begin to understand it. You see how much emotional labor you were doing. You recognize how often you were trying to keep the connection alive, while convincing yourself that patience would eventually produce change. Their silence doesn't control your mood anymore. Their withdrawal doesn't destroy your sense of security. Their inconsistency no longer feels like proof that you're somehow not enough. Instead, you can finally observe the situation without being trapped inside it. That clarity becomes a form of freedom. Once you understand the pattern, you become much less likely to lose yourself inside it again. You stop interpreting every delayed response as a statement about your value. You stop analyzing every change in tone, every period of silence, and every mixed signal. You no longer spend your days searching for hidden explanations behind behavior that repeatedly leaves you emotionally exhausted. You realize that love should not require you to constantly prove that you're worthy of being loved, and that realization is where your freedom begins. When an avoidant realizes that you've genuinely stopped trying to control the outcome, they are eventually left to experience the consequences of the emotional walls they've created. They may begin to understand what those walls have protected them from, and what those same walls have prevented them from receiving. Some people learn from that realization. Others continue avoiding themselves. But either way, their growth is no longer your assignment. You've already moved beyond the version of yourself that needed their approval in order to feel valuable. You no longer need to wait for someone else's emotional breakthrough before giving yourself permission to heal. Your future cannot remain suspended while another person decides whether they're ready for intimacy. Your healing does not depend on whether they become emotionally available. Your peace doesn't require them to return, and your worth was never determined by who stayed, who left, or who failed to recognize what you were offering. Your life begins to change when you stop looking for emotional security in places that repeatedly leave you uncertain and depleted. You begin choosing connections where effort is mutual, communication is honest, and emotional safety exists on both sides. That's the deeper transformation. And the most surprising part may not be that an avoidant finally notices your absence. The real surprise is that by the time they fully understand what they've lost, you may have become someone completely different from the person who once begged to be understood. You don't wake up wondering why they haven't contacted you. You don't replay every conversation searching for clues. You don't measure your importance by the amount of attention someone gives you. Your attention turns back toward yourself. You begin repairing the parts of your life that were neglected while you were spending so much energy trying to save a connection that required two people to sustain it. That kind of healing is quiet. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to make someone jealous. You don't need to prove that you're doing better. You simply become more peaceful within yourself. And ironically, that calm confidence can make you more noticeable than all the chasing ever did. They remember the version of you who was always available, always explaining, always trying to resolve every misunderstanding. Now they see someone who doesn't need to convince them, pursue them, or constantly ask for reassurance. That difference can create an internal conflict for an avoidant person. One part may genuinely miss you and want to reconnect, while another part may still fear the vulnerability required to build something healthy. Those competing emotions can explain why someone may come close and then disappear again. They might send a deeply emotional message and then retreat the following day. They may express affection and then become distant when intimacy starts feeling real. That doesn't automatically mean their feelings were false. It may mean their emotional fears are still stronger than their ability to act differently. And this is why their return should never be the only outcome you're hoping for. Real change isn't proven by one emotional conversation, one apology, or one moment of vulnerability. Change is demonstrated through consistency. It's someone remaining present when things become uncomfortable instead of disappearing. It's accountability instead of excuses. It's communication instead of avoidance. Healthy love doesn't constantly leave you wondering where you stand. If someone returns but immediately recreates the same hot and cold cycle, then the relationship hasn't truly changed. A second chance matters only when both people are willing to build something healthier than what existed before. The deepest lesson is that you cannot heal someone else's fear of intimacy through your own sacrifice. You cannot love someone into doing the inner work they refuse to do themselves. Patience can support growth, but it cannot replace their willingness to confront their patterns. Your responsibility isn't to rescue someone from their emotional defenses. Your responsibility is to protect your own heart while remaining open to relationships that can meet you with genuine effort. Once you understand this, endings become less frightening. You stop interpreting rejection as evidence that you weren't enough. You stop believing every relationship must be saved, regardless of the cost to yourself. You understand that sometimes walking away from a painful pattern is not giving up on love. It is choosing a healthier form of love. Real love isn't built around constant pursuit. It isn't sustained through confusion, anxiety, or one person carrying nearly all the emotional weight, while the other repeatedly retreats. Healthy love requires two people who are willing to choose one another consistently, especially when vulnerability becomes uncomfortable. If an avoidant person reaches that level of self-awareness and genuinely commits to changing, perhaps there can be a new chapter. But if they don't, your life still continues. Your future was never supposed to depend on another person's readiness. It belongs to you. It is shaped by your willingness to choose peace instead of uncertainty, self-respect instead of emotional exhaustion, and mutual love instead of one-sided effort. The day you stop chasing isn't necessarily the day you lose love. It may be the day you finally stop losing yourself. And once you reconnect with yourself, another person's distance no longer has the power to determine your worth. From that point forward, you begin measuring relationships differently. You don't ask only how intensely someone makes you feel. You ask whether they show up consistently, communicate honestly, respect your emotions, and create a sense of safety rather than constant uncertainty. That becomes the standard that protects your heart. That becomes the freedom that comes with healing. And that quiet strength is something no person's emotional distance can ever take away from you. And maybe that is the most important part of this entire journey. The moment you stop chasing is not really about what happens to the avoidant. It is about what finally happens inside you. For so long, you may have believed that if you could just explain yourself better, love harder, remain patient enough, or give them enough space, eventually they would understand your value and choose you without hesitation. But love was never supposed to require you to constantly prove that you deserve a place in someone's life. You were never meant to spend your days analyzing silence, waiting for messages, or trying to decode every change in someone's behavior just to feel secure. At some point, you have to realize that your peace is worth more than an uncertain connection. When you genuinely detach, you stop making decisions based on whether they might come back. You stop wondering whether your silence will make them miss you. You stop trying to create a reaction. You simply begin living again, and that distinction matters. Detachment is not manipulation. It isn't pretending not to care so someone will chase you. It is the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself for the possibility of being chosen by someone else. You can still care about a person and choose not to chase them. You can still have love in your heart and understand that love alone cannot create a healthy relationship. If an avoidant notices your absence, reaches out, or finally begins questioning what they lost, that is their journey. You don't have to control it. And if they return, don't measure their return by how emotional their words sound. Look at what they consistently do. Are they communicating more honestly? Are they taking responsibility? Are they willing to stay present when things become uncomfortable? Are they making an actual effort to create emotional safety? Because someone coming back is not the same as someone becoming ready. A message is not transformation. Missing you is not the same as knowing how to love you. And promises mean very little if the same pattern continues. You deserve more than moments of intensity followed by long periods of uncertainty. You deserve someone who doesn't make you question whether your feelings are too much simply because they struggle to express their own. You deserve a connection where effort moves in both directions, where communication doesn't feel like a battle, and where emotional closeness isn't something you have to constantly earn. You shouldn't have to become smaller, quieter, or less loving just to make another person comfortable enough to stay. So, if you're currently at the point where you're exhausted from trying, perhaps you don't need to try harder. Perhaps you need to pause. Take your attention back. Put your energy into your own life. Let their choices belong to them, and let your healing belong to you. Stop waiting for their breakthrough before allowing yourself to move forward. Stop putting your life on hold for someone who hasn't decided what they want. You don't need their final explanation to begin healing. You don't need their apology to regain your confidence. And you certainly don't need their return to prove that you mattered. The beautiful thing about choosing yourself is that you begin discovering how much of your identity was buried beneath the constant effort to keep someone else close. You start remembering what makes you happy. You rebuild your confidence. You reconnect with people, dreams, goals, and parts of yourself that were pushed aside. Slowly, the silence that once frightened you becomes peaceful. The distance that once felt like rejection becomes space to grow. And the uncertainty that once consumed your thoughts becomes something you no longer need to carry. Maybe they come back. Maybe they don't. Maybe they eventually understand what your presence meant. Maybe they never fully understand it, but your healing cannot depend on which ending you receive. The real victory is reaching a place where either outcome no longer destroys your peace. You can wish them well without waiting for them. You can remember the good moments without returning to the painful pattern. You can love someone from a distance and still choose a healthier future for yourself. Never forget this. The goal was never to make an avoidant chase you. The goal was to stop chasing someone who made you forget how valuable you already were. The moment you stop asking, "How can I make them choose me?" and start asking, "Is this relationship choosing me too?" your entire perspective changes. That is when you reclaim your power. You are not difficult to love because someone couldn't meet you emotionally. You are not unworthy because someone withdrew. You are not replaceable because someone failed to appreciate you. Their emotional limitations do not define your value. Your worth existed before they entered your life, and it will remain long after their presence is gone. So let go without bitterness. Move forward without needing revenge. Heal without waiting for them to notice. And if one day they finally look back and realize what they lost, let that realization belong to them. Your responsibility is not to stand at the same door forever, hoping they will finally walk through it. Your responsibility is to keep walking toward a life where love feels mutual, peaceful, consistent, and safe. Because the greatest transformation doesn't happen when an avoidant finally realizes they miss you. It happens when you realize you no longer need their realization to feel whole. You stop chasing, you stop waiting, you stop proving, and somewhere in that quiet decision, you find yourself again. That is the moment everything truly changes.